Streaming only on Peacock.
John Wayne Gacy is suspected of having killed as many as 32.
Straight from the killer's mouth.
They want you to believe that I alone committed these murders.
The new gripping 6-part documentary series that investigates the crimes that shocked the nation.
The thing everybody thought they knew wasn't the whole story.
John Wayne Gacy, Devil in Disguise. All episodes streaming now. Devil in Disguise. Only on Peacock.
10, 9, 8. Ignition sequence has started. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
You have entered Untold Radio AM. And now broadcasting from a secret location, your hosts, Joel Sturgis and Doug Hajicek. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Untold Radio. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me is my esteemed colleague and good friend, Doug Hajicek. Doug, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
I am doing just fine. I can't complain, other than, some work stuff going on that's making me, if I had hair, I'd be pulling it out. But other than that, I'm doing great.
Let me guess. New software, new computer.
New software, new computer, new interface, new having to get used to crap.
Gosh.
I'm an old dog trying to learn new tricks.
That's hateful.
Well, it's a dog-eat-dog world, and I'm wearing milk bone underwear, my friend.
Plus new headphones.
New headphones. The white ones are gone. With the old and with the new. I do miss the white in some ways, but the new black ones, they're more reflective of my age. I can no longer be a youthful young radio host. I have to go to the deep dark void of black now.
Plus, I've noticed you have great trim. Joel, you have great trim on your headphones. You have a gray shirt on. You match.
I am actually doing quite well in color coordination today. It's amazing how well I am doing. Normally, I just don't care what I wear, and I dash out the door because we're on radio. So, what I'm wearing really doesn't matter. But yes, today I'm doing very, very good. It's like I thought out my stuff today. But that's not important. What is important is this is Untold Radio. You're here, you're you, and you're listening to us. So thanks a ton for tuning in. And we got a lot of great stories. And we got a very interesting guest. I'm going to let Doug tell you all about it at the bottom of the hour. Doug, who are we talking to tonight? Because I took your advice. I didn't dive too deep into this. I kept it very, very light. Because normally I get it and learn everything about a guest, including their blood type if I can. This is going a little bit against the grain. And I will keep an open mind.
Yes, our guest is Scott Deschaine, and I first heard about Scott when I was digging, which happened after I came back from fishing one day, and there were all these things swirling around my house, swirling up in the sky, and I couldn't figure out what they were. And we videotaped them. And I started looking for answers. What did I see? They can't even really describe it. It was like a school of herring swimming in the sky. They would be white. They would swim all together, and then they would go black. And of course, the first thing you think, oh, they're birds. It's a flock of birds. But there's no wings. And they go invisible. All of a sudden, they're just all invisible, and then they all reappeared again.
So now you saw these, not to stop you, but you saw these with your own eyes.
Yes.
And everyone that was with you, I'm sure, saw these as well.
Yep.
You got curious, like Doug, you so often do, because you're a very curious person. And that's what makes you a great filmmaker, too, is because you take the deep dive into things.
Yeah. Well, I didn't ignore it and just throw it in my gray basket and go, yeah, whatever. We just saw birds. started digging and looking for other people that had seen the same thing. And by God, if I didn't find a guy in Texas that had filmed the exact same phenomena or whatever you want to call it. And so I dug and found another podcast with this man on that we're going to have, Scott Deschaine. And he had the whole theory called the living sky, that there's creatures, like basically sky plankton, sky creatures that are living in the outer atmosphere, maybe even out in space, but then they come into our atmosphere at times. They can travel in flocks. They can be all different species. But it's really interesting. And it just captured my imagination because I saw these, and we filmed them. We got to watch the footage over and over and over. And it wasn't like anything you can just blow off and explain. I mean, it was literally hundreds and hundreds of these things, and they never quit moving. Well, about maybe a month later, my daughter called me up. Her and her boyfriend were coming out of the gym, and she called me freaked out. And she said, "I know exactly. We're watching them right now." And they had also seen this bunch of things swirling around the parking lot. And they didn't film them. They were just too freaked out. And they disappeared finally.
They were just in awe of what they're seeing, so they didn't even think about filming it. But you did film them.
Yes.
The ones that I think Scott, you have on film.
Yes, and I told Scott to post it on his website. And if you want, we can post it on Untold Radio website.
Awesome. So definitely be doing that. And again, we need you guys to stop in on untoldradio.com. Your one-stop shop for everything strange and unusual and just plain old fun. Gray matter glitches happen at untoldradio.com. And you can find this show and all the other past shows that we've done right there at untoldradio.am.com. Check that out. Play along with us. I think you'll really enjoy what you find in the subject matters that we are tackling. We are talking about things that most shy away from. We will go wherever we need to go to get these answers explained and get a great answer from the people in the know. So if there's a subject matter that you would like to know, yes, sir.
I was going to say, we are right in between science and paranormal. We're right in there, right in that little slot. But we also cover people who do kind of over-the-top things, over-the-top research. It's a hard show to describe, and I really don't think there's anybody going to ever find the type of variety that we have. Don't you agree?
I would agree. I absolutely do agree. It's an interesting show every time we hit the microphone. And we have these intelligent, thought-provoking guests on that
next
make
week
us ask more questions, even though we're done. We still have more questions because that's how good they are. They answer the questions we have. They answer the questions you have. But then we've learned so much from them that it provokes a whole new set of questions. And so that's the beauty of it.
Next week, Joel, we have on David Ellis. And David he works with really weird mystery sounds. And he does it visually. So he can really get into separating them from normal sounds, whether it's an animal sound or even an EVP.
Sure. That would be really interesting.
Yeah.
As you know, that's right in my wheelhouse as a sound engineer.
Yes.
That I can really appreciate what he's doing. And I did take a little sneak peek at some of the sounds that were sent over to me. And I will have those ready for air, of course, for next week. But I think you guys will be very blown away by the work that he is doing and the stuff that he's going to bring to the table with him. That is next week. You're going to want to tune in for that. But you definitely want to listen tonight. But with no further ado, we got some great headlines to cover for the next 20 minutes before we have Mr. Scott Deschaine on with us to be talking about the living planet, really the living space. It's going to blow my mind right along with yours, so don't worry. Sit back, relax, and just get ready for 2 hours of some very interesting, stimulating talk radio. Untold Radio AM.com is the website. Doug, let me clear my voice there for a second so I can breathe. Man, did I talk a lot without breathing. Here we go. NASA has confirmed the presence of water on the moon. Sunlit surface. Wow. The moon's sunlit surface. So that's important because now it's getting heat and it's getting water. The moon.
So what is keeping the water there? That's the first thing I wonder. If you don't have an atmosphere,
yeah,
isn't
right?
it going to evaporate?
And I'm curious of whether they got moon mud in the space shuttle where they stopped in and someone had to yell at them, "Get that moon mud out of here."
Yeah, the whole thing with water on the moon just seems kind of like they would have known that a long time ago. I could have swore, once again, that I've heard that water's on the moon, that they've seen steam vents with the water shooting out.
But think how game-changing that is. If you have water, you have life.
Right.
That is the essential element to create life is water.
Well, okay, so if you had together, they found microbes and strange organic compounds on the shuttle, on the windows. And that stuff is out in space. It's got to be everywhere. And, there's going to be some type of organic life.
But where did the
puddles.
water come from?
I
Is
think
it
it's
inside the moon? Is there lakes under the crust of the moon? That's the bigger question to me is, okay, now we know the water is there. How is it there? Why is it there?
Well, if
Was
it's
there
anything
life there?
if it's anything like Scott thinks, there is water out in space. There's even our atmosphere has been thought to go all the way to the moon now. Obviously it's thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner.
Yeah.
But it's still, they claim it reaches all the way to the moon.
Correct me if I'm not correct, but didn't they find water on Mars?
Yeah, there's ice, which is
So it's water.
pretty much confirmed. I don't think
so
anybody,
that also has
but
water.
Joe, you have to go there. You got to put some in a cup, melt it, and drink it.
I
Then
think that'd be a great one. We should send Michael O'Neill up there.
Yeah.
Our good friend
Because
Michael.
keep in mind, there's other things that can freeze. There's hydrogen gas, methane can freeze. And it gets really cold on the moon. It gets really hot.
It gets very warm. It gets very cold. The dark side of the moon is very cold. We know this from Pink Floyd. But what's cool is that we're moving that much further and closer. Yeah. That's a little bit of a strange sentence, but we're further away from the answers, but closer to the water.
Yeah.
So we have water, but what's it there for?
It just amazes me, Joel, that we have not gone back to the moon.
Yeah, it's like we stopped there once, had a cup of coffee, and left.
Yeah, it's just...
We've been back since, but 50
40
years?
Yeah, 40.
Yeah, 1969 was the first landing.
Oh.
And that, of course, was Buzz Aldrich, if I can pronounce the man's last name. And we had Neil Armstrong. They were there. And, of course, the iconic planting the flag, one small step for, man and one large leap for mankind. That whole thing, But he never mentioned, hey, by the way, there's water here, and I'm stepping in it. So,
yeah.
how much was kept from the people?
What I think, Joel, is they just kind of keep releasing things. They know it, and then just 30 years, they release it. So anything we know now, 30 years we'll know.
Yeah, I think there's a ton that they know that they're not sharing, obviously. NASA is, and we're going to get to that a little bit later if we have time, is one of the biggest contributors to conspiracy theories ever. There's just so much that they don't share with us that is there for us to see. Now with people with us being able to gaze into space with their own equipment that they have up there, watching space, seeing these strange things they had a full-blown UFO on their own equipment, and we all saw it on the internet, and yet they downplayed it many times. Yeah. There's been odd things that they've downplayed.
Well, there's been observations on the moon, Joel, for literally since the invention of the telescope. You know, they have photographed and filmed and documented strange luminous objects, strange, dark black objects. NASA itself has filmed numerous objects just going across the surface.
Question for you. Do you think that there's already installations on the moon on the dark side? I'm sure you've heard that theory.
Yeah,
I'm sure you've heard that theory that we already have people on the moon.
Yeah, or there was past civilizations, that lived. I mean, there's things that, like this spire, there's this big tower on the moon. That's, to me, really intriguing. Who knows? I don't think we're ever going to know.
No, not until they want to share. And then maybe we'll know.
Which, I find it interesting. The other article that you shared with me about NASA calling for conspiracy theories. They want to hear all these conspiracy.
Yeah, I thought that was such a strange article to come across today, and I had to share it with you.
Yeah.
NASA wants to hear your conspiracy theories. With so many conspiracy theories floating around these days, it can be difficult to keep up with, which is why NASA has decided to dedicate its Halloween video this year to debunking as many common conspiracies as possible, especially those concerning the space agency itself, such as the moon landing. Where some people say that, we never went there. Sound studio. Gary, what was his name? Stanley Kubrick.
Kubrick.
I'm sure. Yeah, Kubrick. There it is. Love the movie The Shining, by the way.
Yeah.
But I have heard that over the years. I want to say we've been there, man.
Listen to my nephew. My nephew had a ton of arguments as to why we never went to the moon. And they're strong. You listen to them and you go, yeah, that makes sense. There's no way we could go. The Van Allen radiation belt is one of them. And there's other little things that have popped up, but I think we went. I do.
If you look, they left their equipment there when they left. The rover is still sitting there. The little dune buggy, it's still there.
But can you see it? Can you see it with a telescope?
I've never tried, but I know what you're saying, and I know the argument because I've gotten many arguments with people that don't believe, just like your nephew doesn't believe that we actually went to the moon. I believe that we did. I think that we did go to the moon personally. I also think I do not subscribe. Now, this I get a little heated on, so excuse me, flat earth theory. I do not believe that we live on a flat earth, by the way.
That's good.
Just throwing that out there.
I'm proud.
Because me and Mike the Mad Dog got into it several times live on radio. He's dead now because he got killed in his own rocket ship. But we argued for many hours on on radio about whether or not the earth is flat. And I agree with everybody else. It's round. By the way, it's round. It's not flat. But that's the kind of things that NASA wants to take the bull by the horns on and debunk. Is those kind of theories. But they don't mention too much about wanting to talk about aliens.
No, not a thing. In fact, it's kind of ironic that they want to debunk and make fun of on Halloween as if all of these conspiracy theories don't hold water. Many of them do. The fact that, in fact, we're going to talk about it tonight. The fact that they have filmed so many weird things out in space that look like they're alive or they're a UFO. They're always ice crystals. Every time, ice.
Every single one of them is ice crystal. The ice crystal is like the weather balloon for Earth. I mean, everything is an ice crystal. You know what? That was an ice crystal.
Those darn ice crystals.
It was shining at me, purple, blue, pink lights. I mean, really? Ice crystal? Yeah, of course, it's ice crystals. How about that little guy that was running around? Was he ice? Nope, ice crystals. So you're right. Everything to them is ice crystal.
Yeah. Until
doesn't matter what it is.
There was a man who, in Toronto, I believe, who had pointed his satellite dish to pick up some of the video transmissions.
You were mentioning this to me just the other day.
Martin Stubbs.
So he actually took his satellite dish that you normally use for television.
Yes, at the public access.
And pointed it up to the International Space Station.
Yes, and I believe the space shuttle too at times.
And he would capture their chatter back and forth.
Yes. The audio and video.
Streaming only on Peacock.
John Wayne Gacy is suspected of having killed as many as 32.
Straight from the killer's mouth.
They want you to believe that I alone committed these murders.
The new gripping 6-part documentary series that investigates the crimes that shocked the nation.
The thing everybody thought they knew wasn't the whole story.
John Wayne Gacy, Devil in Disguise. All episodes streaming now. Devil in Disguise. Only on Peacock.
If you've got a personal auto insurance question, you could talk to a cab driver, although the policies he recommends might include avoiding the interstate, beating traffic by taking the back roads, and only making left turns when absolutely necessary. Or you could talk to your local Geico agent, whose policy is to use their expertise to navigate your insurance, finding the best route to help you save money on insurance for your home, car, and more. And as an added bonus, you'll be able to avoid traffic jams and potholes entirely. To find a Geico agent near you, visit geico.com/local.
You're kidding.
He basically, Joel, he was seeing so many creatures and so many odd things. He was categorizing them. I mean, he had different categories. And then what he would do is
on the show.
Well, the video wasn't all that clear, as you know, at least the video that they're broadcasting back home. And so he was also enhancing. And boy, I'll tell you, it's weird. It certainly backs up Scott, our next guest.
That is amazing that he was able to do that. And B, I'm surprised they don't encrypt their signals. So somebody just can't point up there and listen to what they're talking about. Yeah. I'm surprised it's not encrypted in some way.
Well, not everybody's got a 12-inch satellite dish.
Well, not anymore. Yeah, it is not the 80s anymore, is it?
Yeah.
And but this obviously individual...
He had a way to just dial in the coordinates and it would just, aim right at the space station or...
Just link right into it.
Yep.
That's amazing. That is really amazing.
Yeah, I would love to talk to Martin Stubbs.
Is he, how long ago did this happen, would you say?
Probably, I think in the 90s.
Okay, so it's been a bit.
Yeah, it's been a bit, yep.
Okay. So
you can ask Scott. Ask Scott about Martin Stubbs.
I will try to track down this Martin Stubbs and see if he is indeed still able to talk if he's not dead.
Basically, I would consider him a hero.
Yeah, because think of the risk he put himself at by releasing A, the videos, and B, saying he's the one that did. I mean, he just put himself out there. And remember when all the scientists were getting knocked off one by one?
No.
Remember that? Years back, they're killing these scientists?
No.
You don't remember that?
No.
Because they're getting too close?
Tell me.
Oh my Lord, man.
Don't know anything about science.
They were murdering a scientist a week there for a while. Yeah. Odd reasons like car speeding into trees.
Suicide.
Another one. Oh yeah, lots of that where their hands are tied behind their back.
Yeah.
And somehow shot themselves in the head.
Suicide.
I call that the Clinton.
People that were shot 3 times in the back of the head and then walked up the stairs, that kind of...
Yeah, all those things.
Suicide.
I will dig that information up for you because I don't have it on hand. But I will provide that with you. All the scientists have been knocked off.
What were they working on? What were they doing?
Science-related things, space-related things.
Oh, space. Okay.
Space-related, alien-related things.
Okay.
That they were getting a little too chatty-Cathy with other people, and things got a little too real, and next thing you know, they're cacked off.
Suicide.
There's a lot of them, yeah. Or getting hit by cars in parking garages. Stuff like that. Weird, odd things.
It is,
but anyhow.
Coincidental or...
Yeah, that's what they say. But how can 25 of them die within 3 weeks and all be a coincidence? So anyhow, we got some other big news about a rock that came in. They found it in Michigan. contains the pristine organic compounds of life, they say. The rapid recovery and analysis of a meteorite that fell onto a frozen lake in Michigan 2 years ago is illuminating the pivotal role that these rocks played in delivering the basic building blocks of life on Earth. Now, I got a question for you, and I thought about this reading this. Would you think that something like an octopus is an alien?
Yeah, I mean, that's
super intelligent.
That's occurred to me because they're just weird. I mean, they have blue blood. They don't have red blood. They use copper versus iron.
Intelligent. They are super intelligent. Extremely.
I mean, think about it. An animal that can change its color, its skin shape. It's, it's got numerous hearts. It's, oh my God.
I was curious if any of these creatures caught a ride on a meteorite that came to Earth and at least seeded the Earth for these creatures. Like they're directly from space.
It's possible they could have came in some kind of a cyst, like like so many animals can go into, even bacteria can form a very hard shell that can withstand heat and cold and even boiling and even, I mean, there's certain creatures that you damn near can't kill, like the water bear, the tardigrade, they call them. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're insane. The things that they can withstand. You drop them in water, boom. I mean, they could be asleep for 100 years, and you drop them in water, and they're alive.
Like a sea monkey.
Well, yeah, didn't we? I swear to God, I'm getting deja vu right now, Joel. Didn't we talk about this once?
I think we might have touched the base on the old sea monkeys in the past.
But
anyhow, this meteorite.
But I want to back up. I want to back up to the meteorite. Okay, first off, I'm confused because a meteorite's traveling at about 36,000 miles an hour.
Yes.
6, 7, 8 times the speed of a bullet.
Yes.
How does it drop onto the surface of a lake and not penetrate
punch through it?
Exactly.
They could go right through it.
I'm already confused.
Well, they found it on a frozen lake, of course, January 16th, 2018, at the speed of 36,000 miles an hour is how fast this thing was cruising when it impacted the ice.
Okay.
That is fast. Sense. That is super fast.
Look, I can chisel a hole in the ice with one of those chisels.
Yeah.
And that's going about 30 miles an hour.
So they were able to collect this before it had a chance to degrade by using NASA's, space and weather stuff, and they were able to triangulate right where it was going to impact. And they scrambled quickly to get on the ice to get this thing before any kind of contamination could happen. Like rust, I guess, when I'm reading this now, was the biggest offender is rust. And they were able to get this, and they were looking because now it's really shedding light for the last couple of years on what may have been the catalyst for total life here. Like this might be, these meteorites might have been the seeds in our earthly garden to make us all here.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, it's extremely interesting, but I still don't understand.
Oh, sorry about that. That was my phone, folks, so I do apologize for that. Yeah, I'm looking at it. I'm reading this right now, and rust, of course. Doug, I mean, do you think that we are a chance making, or do you think there's a little more intelligence behind our creation, though?
Oh, I would imagine that we got here from somewhere else. I mean, it's just kind of obvious.
Yeah.
No, I just don't think that, we just appeared. I mean, we were, I think everything was put here. Look at the diversity. It's incredible. I'm not the gradual guy, where everything just kind of gradually happened. I think gradually things do happen, but I think things were sped up.
I agree with you.
Does that make sense?
I think that there is
kind of a combo.
I think there's a little bit of a combo going on. I think that there was, we sped up really, really fast, but then I think there was some evolution taking place.
Sure. I mean,
along the way.
course.
But I think you're right. But I don't think that human beings are necessarily just. I was speaking with a chemist the other day, and he had mentioned that we're nothing more than just a happy accident of chemistry. That's it.
To me, the biggest evidence, Joel, that like humans had some kind of a quick help, because look at all the people with bad backs. We can't even withstand the gravity here.
Very true.
Yeah, I mean, that's just one piece, but it's kind of a strong one. You would think if we would have evolved, our backs would be 10 times, stronger.
The design does not match the environment.
Correct. Yep.
To live in it. So I've noticed that too. And we're kind of fragile to this environment. Look at cancer, for instance, that explodes in the human body.
Yeah.
Those kind of design flaws. So things like that. I'm right there with you. We got to run a break, though. When we come back, we're going to be speaking with Scott Deschaine. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Your minds are going to be blown. So sit back, relax. Right after this commercial, we'll be right back at you.
Hi, Tom Bodette. If you can hear me, then you have an internet connection, which means you can do cool things online, like listen to streaming radio, obviously, or watch a video of a monkey washing a cat. Let your freak flag fly. Or you can book a room at a great price at Motel6.com. Isn't the internet wonderful? Everything you want right at your fingertips, and whoa, did not need to see that. I'm Tom Bodette for Motel 6, and we'll leave the light on for you.
Unexpected reactions to smart financial decisions, brought to you by feedthepig.org.
Well, I finally did it. My student loan is totally paid off.
I can't believe it.
I can't believe it either. I paid more than the minimum each month, and soon enough, it was gone.
So you're just giving up?
Giving up on what?
The life of luxury. Egyptian cotton, caviar Thursdays, designer everything.
What are you talking about?
Our plan. What happened to winning the lottery and mastering the art of the perfect mimosa? Hosting galas, wearing enough jewelry to require a bodyguard, vacationing in the French Riviera, and then buying it.
I just thought maybe it was time to prepare for my future. Set some financial goals, make some smart investments, open a 401k.
Financial goals? Investments? A 401k? You are horrifying right now. Listen, if winning the lottery were easy, everyone would do it.
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs and the Ad Council.
Northern Tool and Equipment.
So me and the boys head out to tailgate today and find some other fans in our spot.
Well, it happens.
Cheering for the wrong team.
Oh, this is war.
Even worse, they've got this couch set up and everything.
A couch?
Yeah, it's sectional.
All right, first thing, don't ever use the word sectional again.
Done.
Second, I want you to grab a 4,700-pound tow chain with J-hook and grab hammer. Throw that on the back of your truck.
Got it.
Now you're going to Hail Mary the J-hook over the end of that couch. Time to find a better spot for your new friends.
That should do it.
There's no problem a little horsepower can't solve. Northern Tool and Equipment.
Taking a family of 5 to the amusement park can cost a small fortune.
Oh, yeah. So to save some money, we thought, hey, let's bring the amusement park to us. Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. Step right up, young man. Are you ready to ride the wacky waterfall?
That's just the bathtub with the shower head running.
Nope, it's the wacky waterfall.
It's the shower, Dad.
Waterfall.
Wacky.
There's an easier way to save. To get a free rate quote, go to geico.com. Then buy online, over the phone, or at your local Geico office.
Green light. Hey, girl. School zone. I'm getting hungry. Car changing lanes. You want to meet me for pizza? Stop sign. Intersection clear. Yeah, street. Pizza sounds good. Ballin Street? Girlin Street!
It's hard to concentrate on two things at once, like texting and driving. Stop the text, stop the wrecks. How will you stop texting and driving? Tell us at stoptextstopwrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
And welcome back to this edition of Untold Radio AM. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me is Mr. Doug Hajicek. Got a great guest on tap tonight, Doug. I've been looking forward to talking to this guy all day. Scott Deschaine. You know what the guy is? Let me pull up his bio because it kind of caught me a little out of position. For over 15 years, author and filmmaker Scott Deschaine has explored and promoted the hypothesis of the living sky, that Earth's atmosphere may provide homes to a wide variety of creatures. His landmark article on the topic called "The Sky is Alive" has been featured in 14 times the world's foremost journal of the strange phenomena. Scott, welcome to the show, man. You got me right there.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Doug.
I'm looking
Thank you
at
for
your website
having me on the show
now. Now, before we begin, I want to tell our audience, everybody that's listening right now, if you're able to, go to thelivingsky.com. Thelivingsky.com. That is Scott's website. I think it will be very important for you, if you can, to be on that website as Scott is talking about this with us. So you can read, you can be a part of that, and also have a deeper understanding, because this is some deep stuff, Scott. Very deep.
There's a lot of evidence. It's a big topic, and they can look at the site while we're talking, or they might just prefer. I'll try and give the sort of elevator pitch overview of the topic, and then they can deal with it in a little more depth at the website, because there's so much information about the topic that one could spend, days and days looking at all the evidence. It's really a rich topic.
I was going to say, is it a bit of a rabbit hole?
Actually, it's exciting because it doesn't lead you to unknown areas. It leads you to more known areas. And that's what's so promising about the idea. Basically, the topic is that, like Earth's oceans, the planet's atmosphere provides a habitat, a wide range of habitats for a wide range of organisms. And there's a possibility that many of what people call UFOs may actually be living creatures that move through the atmosphere, just as some creatures move through the oceans.
So you're talking like an entire ecosystem, only in outer space, in our atmosphere, not necessarily in water, but imagine like a sea, like you'd said, but only off Earth.
Absolutely. Think of us as living at the bottom of an ocean of air. We take it for granted because we move around in it all the time. But our planet is surrounded by this massive atmosphere. It's about 200 miles. The main part of the atmosphere is about 200 miles tall. It has all the elements that an organism would need for life, what we call a habitat. It has about 5 million times more volume than the ocean. So there's a ton of space. There's a lot of water moving through the atmosphere, more than we can even imagine. The jet stream has as much water moving through the sky as the Amazon River. There are tons of minerals in the sky. There's nitrogen. There's all kinds of dust, meteors that hit the atmosphere all the time, adding minerals to the atmosphere, plus the minerals that are sucked up from the planet's surface by the winds and the vortexes that pull it up. And then there's energy. And at about any given time, there's about 200 massive thunderstorms that are moving around the planet all the time. So there's a ton of energy. So these are all elements that creatures would need to have a habitat.
Scott, how did you come across this subject? I mean, what was the thing that triggered your interest in this?
Well, I always loved a good scary story. And some UFO stories are just so creepy, they're so otherworldly, that I wanted to find out, what could possibly explain these things. And there's a lot of noise in the UFO topic, but there's a certain number of researchers, a certain number of investigators that just looked at the facts. And when you looked at the facts, there were a lot of real mysteries. So a lot of it didn't seem to make sense. But then as we started to move into the age where people had cameras and we could see these things, we started to be able to look at the actual evidence and evaluate it. And, I started to look at these things and I said, wait a minute, these don't look like rocket ships. And then I started to look at some of, it's weird how everything sort of came together. I started to look at some of the mysterious phenomena that seemingly were unrelated, but ended up sort of falling together like pieces of a puzzle. I was visiting Marfa, Texas on a cross-country trip, and I saw some of the Marfa lights, the Marfa mystery lights, and they appear almost every night by the side of the road in this little town of Marfa, Texas. And like many places around the world, these mystery lights move, and people describe them as having some kind of intelligence or intent. So I'm sitting there watching this thing, and it looks like it's browsing through the desert vegetation, as if it was some kind of animal browsing. And then it flared, and it got very bright, and it went up into the atmosphere. And it must have been, 50, 60 feet up above the ground. It got real bright, and then it split into two. And then each one started moving independently. And I was like, well, that looks like it's something that's alive. So I started looking into the different types of life, and I did a lot of research into habitats and ecosystems, as you mentioned, Joel, and started to realize, wow, we're seeing a lot of parallels between what people call UFOs and the marine invertebrates that we find in our oceans. They're some of the most successful organisms in the oceans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when you saw these lights and you saw them put their show on, and you have this lightning bolt hit you, but wait a minute, they're acting like a creature that you would see, almost a marine creature. When you started digging, was there a lot of resources out there, or is this not a subject matter that's really widely accepted or talked about at this point?
Well, there have been some people who have
This week at Target, clean up with a free $10 gift card when you buy 3 select laundry or cleaning essentials from Tide, Glad, Downy, and more. Take spring cleaning to the next level at Target, where lower prices and great deals make it easy to save. Restrictions may apply.
There's been some people who proposed the topic. In fact, there have been a lot of people who have proposed that a lot of UFOs may actually be living things. One of the earliest ones was Charles Fort, who investigated a lot of, collected reports of a lot of unknown phenomena. And he speculated that there might be living things moving through the atmosphere. Kenneth Arnold, the guy whose 1947 sighting sparked the term flying saucers, he attracted a lot of reports from pilots and other people, weather witnesses. And he concluded, after studying these things his whole life, he concluded that they had to be some kind of atmospheric animals. And he had reports, pilots telling him of things approaching their planes, swimming up to the planes, approaching them. The pilot described something they called like a ray fish that swam right up to the plane and zipped by. And so Arnold thought these were perfectly natural, like fauna of the atmosphere. But it's strange. Everybody knows him for coining the term flying saucers, but not many people know that that was his conclusion after studying him for his whole life. And then, there was a gentleman named Trevor. I'm sorry, go ahead, Joel.
Oh, I was going to say, now that you mention it, and I'm looking at some of the videos here and the evidence, they almost do look like a sea creature. The movements, the body structure.
They do.
Once you hear you talk about it and I start looking at it deeper, you can definitely see where, they very much move with intelligence, but they're moving like something in water at the same token. It's very odd.
They do. And it's like a scientific process. I mean, you identify the problem. Okay, what are these things in the atmosphere? And you look at the evidence. Now, when I first started looking at this stuff, it was kind of the golden age of UFO videos. Before there were DVDs and the internet, people were putting out tapes of their sightings. And this was the first time people actually had cameras that could record these things. So I looked at hundreds of UFO tapes and digitized a lot of them and started to see a pattern. I categorized them and found, and then of course as cell phones came around, then more people had access to cameras, and now we have the internet where we can share stuff instantly. I mean, it's an amazing time. The time is kind of right for this topic. But as I looked at it, I said, okay, well, if these things are some kind of animals, they might resemble marine invertebrates. As I mentioned, these are some of the most successful animals that we know of in the oceans. I mean, we have fish, we have mammals, but we also have the invertebrates. So some of the most successful forms of invertebrates marine invertebrates are the jellyfish and the squid. And the jellyfish are disc-shaped, like a lot of people report UFOs, and squid are like rocket or cigar-shaped, which is the other major category of UFO reports. And you start to look closer at these creatures and you realize, wow, these are amazing creatures. I mean, they have so many different capabilities. And I identified 10 different ways that they actually resemble UFOs, and the UFOs act like these creatures. So I can rattle them all off if you want.
Man, this is really a change, because most of the UFOs I've talked about over the years on radio, and I've been doing this for 30 years, is more of the mechanical UFO stuff, more like the Travis Waltons of the world that was abducted, taken to the ship. This has got to be the nuts and bolts approach. Exactly, and this has got to be the first time that I have really heard it put into these kind of terms of being more of like a jellyfish, invertebrates, being living creatures, being an ecosystem. But it begs the question, if this is an ecosystem, what part do we play in it?
Well, that's a major question. And that's one of the reasons that it's important that we study this, because, you know, we're on the surface of the planet. If you think of the entire planet, the sliver of surface that we occupy, you know, not the oceans, just on the land, just in certain areas of the land, we live on the surface. I mean, there are huge habitats, huge environments that we can't even survive in. So these creatures may play a bigger role in our planet's ecosystem than we may even suspect. Now, first, let me say that I'm not saying this is the answer. I mean, I'm a kind of an all of the above sort of guy. A lot of these things probably are misidentifications. Some of them may actually be alien spaceships. But from what the evidence that I've looked at, it seems that a lot of them can be explained by a biological approach. And the nice thing about this hypothesis is that we can state the hypothesis and go look for new evidence. We don't have to look back and say, oh, it could be, but it's this. You don't have to argue about it. We could actually find definite ways to move forward and study this and look for new evidence.
See, Scott, the first time I saw something that was similar to a living creature in space, which was, I think, in mission STS-75. Is that correct, Scott? That was a spaceship.
If that's the first one you saw, that's some of the most fascinating evidence, and it's kind of unimpeachable source, is the NASA evidence. So tell them about STS-75, Doug. Well, I mean, that's scientific history.
Right. I mean, they released a tether, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm going off kind of old memories. It was 11 miles long. I don't know how wide it was, but it was this huge electrical grid. Unroll to see if it collects energy from the atmosphere to help power, future spaceships. So they unroll this thing, and for some reason it breaks away. Right? It just snapped, and it breaks away and starts floating off. Well, somebody is intercepting this signal, and this thing is floating off. And what looks like, and anybody who watches it has never disagreed with me, it looks like jellyfish start swimming up to this thing. And you can see them breathing, you can see respiration. And you can see all the different sizes. And so take it from there, Scott.
I mean, the numbers are just overwhelming. And after the tether broke, the shuttle sort of backed off. They didn't want to get fouled in it. So the next orbit around, they were in night, and they were watching the tether approach sunrise. So it was in the lit portion, right as the sun was about ready to rise. And as Doug said, it's just, it's just an instinctive. You look at this, and there's all of a sudden these things, hundreds, thousands of these pulsing discs swarm this tether. And it's like they're investigating. It's like, what's this that's moving into our environment? That was, to me, like kind of a lightning bolt moment, as you mentioned, Joel. Because that was like when I started investigating this, I said, okay, what's going to be the best source of evidence? What about NASA? Do they have any footage of this? And this was just when the internet started to happen. And a gentleman named Martin Stubbs, who's kind of a hero, he was a program director for a Canadian public access television station. He used to just record all the downlinks from the shuttle missions. And they weren't on a secure channel at that time. So he would just pop in videotapes, just record them one after the other. And he started making these things public when he started to see that there were some real anomalies on some of these tapes. And he made this stuff available. I mean, goodness gracious, this stuff could have been lost in an archive somewhere. But because he made it available to the general public, this is truly what Doug's describing, the STS-75 tether incident, is really a piece of scientific history. It will be looked back on as changing the way we look at our planet.
Did anybody ever gauge the speed and size of these things, Scott?
There have been several analyses of them, but it's kind of hard to tell. Like you mentioned, the tether is, I think, 11.8 miles long. And some of these things are so big, they're actually moving behind the tether. And so you think, well, how big are these things? And there's hundreds of them. And they're moving, they're so big, but they're moving so fast. It's in a realm and a scale that it's hard for us to even imagine, for us to even conceive. And these things are up there moving around.
But if you think about it, Scott, if you think about it, why would size matter out in space? It wouldn't.
Well, unless you're collecting like solar energy, the bigger creature is going to have access to more of that energy. They're going to have there's a possibility. A lot of jellyfish have symbiotic photosynthetic organisms living within them, and they provide some of the metabolic processes to convert food, and the jellyfish brings them to the sunlight so they can get the energy. Now, the same guy, Martin Stubbs, recorded a great piece of video as the shuttle's moving into sunrise. There's a huge swarm of objects that start swimming up from the darkened earth into the sun. Thousands of them. It's like a migration up into the sunlight as dawn approaches. So it's really historic stuff. In fact, I did a whole program, Not Alone, The Life Above, which presents the hypothesis for the living sky. And I reviewed all the NASA evidence I could get my hands on. And it reviews all that evidence. It actually presents all the uncut footage of that material. It's really scientific history. And I don't think NASA's gotten credit for doing it. I don't even know if they know if they know that what they've accomplished, because I haven't seen where anybody's actually researching, life in the atmosphere at that level.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious. NASA has to be aware of this. Am I correct? I mean, these creatures are out there. I mean, because I've never seen them. Now, I'm kind of digging here while you're talking. I can't find anything where NASA acknowledges this. Of course, why would they, kind of thing, because they don't acknowledge anything. But I'm looking at this video.
I don't know if it's so much conspiratorial so much as I just don't know if they know. I don't know if it's like a whole new realm of science.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like a whole new realm of science.
Probably the most interesting thing, Scott and Joel, is the audio, to hear the audio of the astronauts and mission control as they're watching this live, and they're going, what are all those white things swimming?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Then John Glenn,
the mission control. Yeah. Mission control asks Franklin Chang Diaz. They go, Franklin, we're seeing a lot of white things in the foreground. What are you seeing up there? And he says, well, there's a lot of things swimming in the foreground, and they're, they instinctively know there's something swimming up there. And as you mentioned, Joel, I don't want to cut you off, but from the first mission, when John Glenn went up, he saw the fireflies, and the astronauts were wondering, and the scientists at NASA were wondering at that time if there were living creatures up there. Now, from what I understand, the next mission, they banged on the side of the capsule. They got some ice particles to come off, and they said, "Oh, well, that's that. That's the explanation." Mm-hmm. 50 years later, John Glenn and Scott Carpenter were John Glenn and Scott Carpenter were talking about it, and 50 years later, they were still talking about those fireflies. And they weren't satisfied that they were ice crystals. I mean, Scott Carpenter especially was saying, he wondered if they were critters. They wondered if they were critters, living critters up there. So I think there's a huge opportunity to go up there and actually check it out. It would be simple to get up there and actually check, do some basic collection and observation techniques to see what's moving around in the atmosphere.
Now, I got a question for you, Scott. Do any of these creatures show high intelligence? Because if it's an ocean, if we're taking that premise of an ocean, there has to be predators.
Right. I think there's a wide... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so take us through what you think as far as the ecosystem, because there has to be that food chain. Who's feeding on who, and how's this all working? And I know you're just about to explain that to me before I can finish the question. So I will step back, and I'll let you explain that to the audience.
Well, like Joel, like you said, it's kind of a rabbit hole, but it just keeps going on. And the more you look, the more it makes sense. So I have described the process as like an if-then sort of process. Well, if this is the case, then you might see this. So if there are creatures living up there, then you might see, like you mentioned, the whole ecosystem. And indeed, we seem to find a wide range of these objects. We see swarms of creatures that seem to be relatively just sort of floating around, kind of like jellyfish. And then we see creatures that are what seem to be creatures that are moving with, the mature creatures that move with incredible rapidity and intent. And there seems to we even seem to see evidence of predation going on, where you see creatures, swallowing each other creatures preying on the other creatures. But to people who are interested in the UFO issue and whether this is plausible, I might suggest learning about marine invertebrates, because the life cycle of marine invertebrates is so complex, we don't really understand all of it for a lot of these species. They go through many different stages. They reproduce sexually and asexually. So they have spores, they have eggs, they have cyst forms, they have buds that keep budding off things, and they have mature forms that are more mobile and intelligent. So they can grow to immense sizes because they're not limited by a skeleton. So their strategy when they reproduce is to produce millions, and then most of them are going to get eaten, or they're going to die because conditions aren't right. But the few smart survivors are going to mature, and that seems to be what we see in the atmosphere. We see some large survivors, and we also see cases where we see like millions or numerous immature of these objects moving around. In terms of the intelligence, this is kind of one of the challenges that we face as humans, because when we think of intelligence, we think of human intelligence.
Yeah.
But if we look at these creatures, how do we define intelligence? They seem to be, these invertebrates are incredible survivors. They're successful. They are some of the most successful organisms in the oceans. Someone said that they said that 60% of all biomass in mid-level ocean waters are jellyfish. So they can survive harsh conditions. Some of them have a form where nothing can kill it. It's like a cyst form. It can dry out. It can be exposed to radiation. It can freeze. And 50 years later, when it's exposed to water, boop, it pops right up, ready to grow again.
Like
some of them
Doug
even
and
have
I
a form
mentioned, like sea monkeys.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Well, yeah, those are marine invertebrates. Exactly. They have nervous systems that are different than ours, and we're limited by, we have our binocular vision. We have our two eyes. Well, imagine what the world looks like, or the sky looks like, to a jellyfish that might have, 27 eye spots, and it can see things. What kind of perception does that thing have? Or a squid, who has, like the squid that we know, has some of the largest eyes and largest nerves in the animal kingdom. They react faster than we can even imagine. And they also have some jellyfish actually can regress in maturity when conditions are unfavorable. They actually can regress through the cycles of their maturity and then progress again when conditions are ripe. And some people have said that's like almost like a form of eternal youth. It's like a form of immortality. So, they survive, they reproduce in great numbers, they can survive harsh conditions. What's intelligent? I mean, are we more intelligent, or is that more intelligent? That's kind of one of the questions that we face.
Sure. Are people ever attacked by these things? Human beings?
Actually, yes. And that's one of the, I think that's one of the important reasons that we need to learn more about these things, because people encounter these things, and sometimes with unfortunate results. It's one of the ways that they resemble marine invertebrates is in the feeding and the hunting, the predation. I mean, some of these, the marine invertebrates are some of the most successful hunters. They're like apex predators. They use a variety of techniques. They have jellyfish have barbed stingers with neurotoxins in them, and sometimes their tentacles extend far beyond the main body. And this is why you sometimes hear people, if this is the case, you might see people who are far away from a so-called UFO, feeling like burns or feeling their eyes being irritated. Yeah. Actually, there was a doctor who did a study of the effects of people who've been exposed to UFOs. And he found a variety of short-term and long-term neurological and physical damage. And if you look at the parallels between that and people exposed to the neurotoxins and the attacks from invertebrates, it's almost an exact parallel. So this is one of the reasons it's important. There have been people who've been exposed to these things, who've been attacked by these things, and some have been affected. They've been affected for the rest of their lives. Some of them have become vegetables. Some of them have had horrible burns and developed, they developed debilitating diseases, like the Cash Landrum incident. I don't know if you remember that.
No, I've never heard of it. This is all new to me, Scott. So everything that you're saying is brand new to me.
Well, this is a kind of a famous case. I forget the year, but these two ladies outside of Houston saw this giant kind of diamond-shaped UFO, and they said it was surrounded by a bunch of helicopters. And later, they developed all kinds of awful symptoms. They were nauseous, they had skin irritation, and they both were sent to the hospital, and they later both developed cancer and passed away. There have been tons of people who've been close to UFOs who've had these kind of debilitating effects. And this is kind of one important reason that we might want to study it, to develop some kind of first aid in case people have been exposed to these things. And I would caution anybody who sees a UFO to avoid it. Because
so don't go up to it. Don't try to interact. Just with caution.
No, do not try and interact. There are many stories of people who have been carried away by these things and never been seen again. Yeah. In fact, John Keel, the famous reporter, investigator who wrote the book on the Mothman.
Yeah.
He said that maybe some of the UFO witnesses that described their encounters were the lucky ones who got away. So if these things are, if we have a whole variety of aerial predators, then we might see, cases where people are suddenly disappearing. We might see, like David Paulides' reports of all these people just being spirited away in national parks. We might see cases where there's widespread predation of cattle that seem to be mutilated without seeming to even know they're being attacked, as if they were exposed to some kind of neurotoxin. So yeah, that's another reason that it's important that we look at these things. But
Scott, it opens up so many more questions, because everything that we know about UFOs, like you brought up mutilation, right? Just then you brought up cattle mutilation, which is really still unexplained. Why and how and what's and where's, but what you just mentioned, that makes complete sense now about like a cattle mutilation, because it's not
that's why it's exciting, Joel.
That is really mind blowing.
Yeah, because when you think of a cattle mutilation, you think, well, if aliens want to come down and take some eyes and flesh and all these weird.
Stop by the butcher, man, and you can get all you want.
They would just grow their own cattle. They're not going to come down here and do this. So cattle mutilations never made any sense to me. So I really feel that the cattle mutilation fit into Scott's theory really, really well.
It punched me right in the face there for a second. We said that. It's like cattle holy crap, that makes more sense than anything else I've ever heard about cattle mutilation or mutilation.
And
right
you
there.
can drill down even further. It's it's uncanny, the parallels. I mean, Doug is familiar with like the hunting capabilities of squid and what fearsome predators they are and how sharp their beaks are. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the bite marks from a squid, it's like or an octopus, it's like a sort of a diamond-shaped bite, and that's really parallel to a lot of the wounds that we see on some of these cattle mutilations. So, I mean, there's some great footage of squid-like objects zipping through the sky. I mean, the jellyfish are creepy enough, but the squid are what scare me because they're really intelligent, they're really fast, and they seem to be very fierce predators. So, if they're up there. There's actually some footage from the ground. I don't know if you've seen this, Doug, of the STS-75 from the ground. They were ground observers, and as the tether's going by, this one thing that looks like some kind of giant squid zips by and checks it out, and then zips away. So that's not as widely known as
no, I'm not familiar with that. Shuttle. So Scott, I've got one question.
Sure.
So these things apparently can live out in space, come into our atmosphere, do their whatever they need to do, and then leave again and live in the vacuum of space. I mean, does that kind of go along with your theory?
I think it's possible, Doug. I mean, we have to look at, where the science leads us. If we can propose and investigate that, you see, one of the things we do as humans to try and understand the world is we draw lines and we make edges where there might not be edges.
Right.
I mean, there's not really an edge. There's not a hard edge between the ocean and the atmosphere. There's more like an interface where the fluid water changes to the gas. Kind of constantly it changes depending on pressure and temperature. So why wouldn't the things in the ocean move through the atmosphere? And then we got to look at the edge of the atmosphere. There's not really a hard line at the edge of Earth's atmosphere. It goes out now. I think they call it the geocorona. They've found that it extends twice as far as the distance from the Earth to the moon. It's the very, diffuse part of the Earth's atmosphere, but it still goes out that far. So you think, okay, well, if these things are coming into the atmosphere, how would they come in? Now, there was a gentleman, Louis Frank, who proposed that he was studying photographs of the atmosphere, and he found these anomalies, and he proposed that there were these house-sized comets that were hitting the Earth every day, thousands of them entering the atmosphere every day. So, who knows, maybe some of those, I can't imagine all that material is sterile. And then the investigation proved that, there's all this material entering the Earth's atmosphere. So that's one way they would come in. And if there were these sort of dormant forms, well, maybe they hit the warm, moist atmosphere of our planet, and then they start to blossom and bloom. And that's when we would see these UFO armadas, these swarms.
That's the question I had. So then how would they serve? Oh, go ahead, sir. I was just going to ask, how would they survive the entry into our atmosphere? But you just answered it right there through the comets. I have heard that before, that we're being constantly bombarded by space material that we're not even aware of.
That's right. So the question is, well, does it go both ways? Do they leave the atmosphere? And you think, well, how would they overcome gravity? Well, you say, well, okay, is there some kind of mechanism where material leaves Earth's atmosphere? And they recently discovered, I think about 20 years ago, that there are these fountains of magnetic force near the poles of the planet where material is shot up into space. It's shot out of the planet. So you think, well, gee, if that's the case, I wonder if we see any of these things near the poles. And sure enough, there's been some great footage from the shuttle, and there's some great footage from the space station of these things flying around in the auroras near the poles. So who knows, maybe when they are mature, some of them actually do leave the planet and sail off into, other realms. But if that's the possibility.
Yeah. I was going to say, Scott, where do they like to hang out?
That's a great question.
the reason why I ask is because some people have documented them. Doug is one of them, seen them.
Right.
And then you don't see them everywhere, like in an ocean where there's thousands of millions of fish hanging around. You know, right? You dive like the Great Barrier Reef, and there's just fish everywhere, right? Here,
right.
You don't see that many. So there has to be their Great Barrier Reef somewhere that they like to organize at.
Well, that's a great question, Joel. You think, like I said, if you think like a biologist, think, okay, there's this ocean of air, there's these things moving through it. Where would be like a good habitat for these things? And there's kind of a rule of thumb when you're looking for life, is that you're going to find more life near the edges of two or more habitats where they meet, because then an organism can get the resources from both habitats. Like, for example,
Me, but also you. The Pharaoh fast forwards his favorite foreign film, Powder Donut. Okay, what's my line?
The only line I see here on the script is get options based on your budget with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive.
Oh man, that's a tongue twister, huh? I'm sorry, I'm gonna need a few more minutes. Bulbous Walrus, the Bulbous Walrus.
The Name Your Price tool, only from Progressive.
The owl ran afoul of the comatose coxswain.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Streaming only on Peacock.
John Wayne Gacy killed 32.
Straight from the killer's mouth.
They want you to believe that I alone committed these murders.
The new gripping 6-part documentary series, John Wayne Gacy, Devil in Disguise. All episodes streaming now, only on Peacock.
Something's at the edge of a forest in a field. They can find shelter in the forest, but then they can go out and hunt for bugs in the field. So you say, oh, okay, where are the edges in our atmospheric ocean? And you think, all right, there's crevices, there's, fault lines in the earth, there's caves, there's volcanoes, there's mountain ranges, there's bodies of water. And around all these places, we see a lot of activity, unexplained atmospheric phenomena that seem to resemble life. One area where these things resemble marine invertebrates is in bioluminescence. So a lot of unexplained lights that we see seem to act like living things. I think one estimate was that 90% of ocean life uses some sort of bioluminescence. So we see these kind of things and moving around these crevices, fault lines, and other types of habitats. But really, almost every level of the atmosphere that we look at, we see something that looks like life. Now, we have limitations of our perception, and just because we don't see them every day doesn't mean they're not there. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the number of people that see these things, it's incredible. Thousands and thousands of people see something weird moving through the sky. So they may be all around us, but one of the most interesting habitats, you mentioned where do they like to hang out, is and this was something, again, this was another lightning bolt that went off for me, is you think of the atmosphere, and there are these giant thunderstorms that are full of energy and moisture and all kinds of dynamic movement. And then you got the relatively clear air above the tops of the thunderstorms. So I said, well, okay, there's an edge right there. I wonder what's there, if there's anything there. And I remember back in the days of fax machines, I got a fax. I used to get on NASA's fax blast, and they observed for the first time something that they called a sprite. And I sent off for a color picture of it. And this was this thing that they saw emerging from the top of a thunderstorm. And it looked just like a jellyfish. And so scientists started looking for these phenomena above the tops of thunderstorms. And they call them sprites and jets and elves. They give them these kind of cute names. But the way they've described them is a whole new aerial bestiary. It's almost like they instinctively know that these are some sort of living things. Now, at first they thought these were just, short-lived forms of lightning. But then they found the same sprites persisting for up to like 30 minutes. I mean, and these things are, they can be like 100 miles tall. Now,
jeez,
and talk about, and think of a living thing that's 100 miles tall. And if you look at these sprites and you think of the size of them and then look at the STS-75 footage, you go, well, if you wanted to see a swarm of sprites, that's that's kind of what a swarm of sprites would look like. I mean, some of them even have like the tails, the classic jellyfish shape. So, but that sort of brings us to, I mean, the space shuttle Columbia, before it broke up upon reentry, when its last investigation was of sprites. And it found that these things were much more common and much more numerous than we had suspected. So, okay, you got these thunderstorms moving around the planet all the time. And you got these giant things moving above the tops of them. I mean, and they might be creatures. We don't know until we investigate. What does that do for our planet's atmosphere? I mean, could these things, the processes that these things are carrying on, could they actually be doing something to our atmosphere? Maybe they're even creating the atmosphere that makes our life on the surface possible. So is our atmosphere have some kind of like bio layer in it, you know, that's sort of, you know, composed of living things that actually insulates us from the harmful radiation of space and creates the kind of environment we need to live in? So that's another reason it's important to study these things, get up and see. And it's interesting. Some of the people that study sprites, I've talked to them about it, and half of them go, no way. And the other half seem to go, So, yeah, it's just the idea. That's a case of where our arrogance, oh, we're the apex predators. We're the smartest life form on the planet. We're the intelligent ones.
Yeah.
We go, wait a minute. There's something 100 miles tall living over your head all the time. It's kind of humbling. So,
Scott, is there any pattern to like air temperature? You know, when people are seeing them, you know, and filming them, because obviously if they're filming them, they're right here. Because I remember the day I saw the school of whatever they were swimming around the roof of the house in the yard. It was a beautiful, sunny, 72-degree day.
Well, that's a good question. You know, my first instinct is to say that these things are seen in more, you know, in warmer climates. And I think you probably see, this is one area where they resemble marine invertebrates. They seem to have life cycles and movements, and there's population explosions. So these things might move through these open atmosphere when the temperatures are agreeable. And Doug, you mentioned you saw it in a clear sky. A lot of times people see them in clear skies because the sunlight hits them. You know, these things might be composed mostly of water vapor and gas, so they're going to be relatively invisible unless the light hits them just a certain way. I think that's why a lot of times people see them near dawn or dusk, because the sun is hidden, but the light from the sun is illuminating what's in the atmosphere.
Well, could that also explain why they kind of seem to disappear? You know, all of a sudden they'll turn another direction and they're just kind of gone.
Absolutely. I mean, some of these things, some marine invertebrates have incredible control over their bioluminescence, and some of them even can change their colors, really complex color patterns. So people they describe some UFOs as having colors, the lights, you know, beyond their ability to describe. I mean, these marine invertebrates can control light in ways we can't even imagine. They have their own language. They might use it for, you know, courtship, for hunting, for communication, and people see a UFO at night and they see these bright lights, and then they say the thing just seemed to disappear. Maybe it's just turning off the lights, you know?
It could be. I mean, it makes a lot of sense because, you know, people explain seeing the strange lights in the sky, like even the Phoenix lights. You know,
right.
Those acted strange as well, like what you're describing in a lot of ways.
Well, have you seen the shape of the Phoenix lights when you look at the footage of them?
Yeah, they were it was triangular at first.
It kind of looks to me almost like an arc, doesn't it? Almost like
yeah. I'm gonna have to do that. Yeah, kind of like a.
So imagine it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So imagine if like a giant sprite was like dying and descending to the earth, and it still had some of its light organs that were flaring. I mean, what would it look like? Would it look like, I don't know, it almost looks like it might be something like that. Which brings to another point, another way they resemble marine invertebrates is that they leave physical traces. People say, well, gee, if there's jellyfish moving through the atmosphere, wouldn't we see blobs of jelly fall from the sky and carcasses and stuff? And sure enough, people have seen, what they call angel hair, which are kind of like filaments that descend from UFOs. But they're so delicate, and they seem to sublimate. They just disappear. They vaporize, almost like a jellyfish on a beach. And people have actually seen blobs, luminous blobs falling from the sky. And again, they seem to just evaporate in very short time, almost like a jellyfish on a beach. And if people see these things, they should not touch them, because people have touched these things. They pick them up, and their skin has gotten very inflamed and swollen because they might have some active stingers, some active toxins in them still, like picking up a jellyfish on a beach. You don't want to do it. But in fact, there's even a Welsh name for it called plethora. They call it rot of the stars, where people see a light descending and they go out and they look and there's a blob on the ground.
Man, that I'm
there's a whole list
your,
of
the pictures that you have on your website are just, again, that's thelivingsky.com. If you're just tuning in and you're listening to us talk, Scott has got a heck of a website out there that explains a lot of it, thelivingsky.com. He's also a filmmaker, by the way. And if you'd like to see a film about it, you have one upcoming, don't you, Scott? Or one in the works, or one that's been released. I mean, you're quite the filmmaker, but the one I'm talking about is it's the Kochi lights, a mystery of the living sky. If I can talk, I'm reading and reading and reading here, and I'm trying to wrap my mind around what I'm looking at as far as the ecosystem goes, and I'm kind of looking for that ecosystem checks and balances. What keeps it perpetuating? What keeps it going? But like you'd said, if we're living in an ocean of air and they are above us and they're in the atmosphere, it begs the question, how far do they stretch? Are we talking like the entire universe, or are we unique that we have these things near us and around us?
Well, that's one of the reasons that I think it's promising to study these things, because they may actually be our pathway to learning more about, travel beyond our planet. If these things, I like to say that any problem we can imagine, nature has already solved. So if these things have solved the problem of how to travel for vast distances across, inhospitable environments, and then come to life when they reach, promising environment, maybe we can learn from that. Maybe we can learn to think like invertebrates. Now we're thinking like mammals, sending out individual missions, to places and waiting generations to do that. Well, we might say, hey, maybe we can, in addition to that, think like invertebrates, use our technology to create, spores or some kind of seeds of our own genetic material, put them in a dormant phase, and then send them out. Heck, we might even piggyback on some of these things and use their capabilities to travel vast distances. But it also, one of the reasons that it's important to study these things is that if we develop techniques to look at the atmosphere and survey it for life, we might be able to use those same techniques when we're looking for life on other planets. Right now, our efforts at looking for life on other planets seem to be limited to looking at the surface where we live. And if some of these planets have a lot of life in the atmosphere, then that might be a promising area where we could look. But let me get back to the Cohoc lights that you mentioned. As I mentioned, the nice thing about this hypothesis is that it provides a lot of avenues for further study. And one of the reasons I hope to popularize the hypothesis is because there are so many possibilities for people to look at this. I hope a lot of the upcoming young scientists will look at this and say, I want to study that, because there are so many opportunities to just create historic discoveries in this realm of science. And I predict that if we just look for these things, we're going to find them. So you talk to people, these things kind of are all over the place. And I love talking to people about weird lights that they see and weird things they see in the sky. And it seems like everywhere you go, people have stories about the weird things that they've seen. So my daughter was going to school in Virginia, and I talked to some people down there about these weird lights that people saw. They called it the Cohoke light. So I said, well, let me go out and check this out. So over the course of about a year, every time I visited her, I'd go down, I'd take a crew, and we'd go and interview people and go look for the Cohoke light. So we have a new film out called The Cohoke Light, and it's available now for streaming or for downloading, and you can check it out at thelivingsky.com. In fact, we have a code for that and for Not Alone. If you put in Untold AM, you'll get 20% off of the streaming and download
Very cool.
price.
Thank you.
But so we went out, certainly. We went out and looked over the course of a year, went out to these railroad tracks where people see this light. And we used our cameras, and I think we got some, I don't want to say it's historic, but we got some footage of some things that I've never seen before. And these are lighted creatures moving through the sky that I don't know if anybody's recorded these things before. And this was just us on our limited budget, with just a little bit of patience and a little persistence. That it's an interesting environment down there. There's a river called the Pamunkey River that's freshwater and saltwater. So again, there's that habitat edge. You know, there's a tidal zone where the freshwater and the saltwater mixes. And there's a marsh right there with underground springs. So you got all these edges moving together. And people have seen these lights moving through the swamps, moving through the trees along a railroad track down there. There's a lot of legends surrounding the light. We cover some of the legends in there. There's a Native American tribe down there, the Pamunkey Indians. They're the tribe where Pocahontas was from, and her father Powhatan's grave is on there. They're the oldest reservation in the United States. They're still on the land that they were at back when the country was first settled. It's kind of amazing that they've been able to stay there. So we interviewed some of them, and they have some great stories about the light, moving along the tracks and scaring people. It's a lot of fun. And as a matter of fact, we found that Powhatan's mantle, he was like the leader of the Indian nations, and he had a mantle made out of 4 deer skins. And it's currently in a British museum, but they have pictures of it there. Well, we looked at the pictures of it, and there's a human figure in the middle, and these 2 deer on either side of them, and surrounding them are a bunch of orbs, which are about the same size as people describe the Cohoke light as being, and it's like, what are these things? So it's a really interesting area, and we got some.
Have been seen for generations then, Scott.
Yes.
Interesting.
Like a lot of these places, there are places all over the world where people see these recurring, unexplained luminous phenomena. And these are some of the prime targets on the surface for investigation, because you can go there and you're going to see something. And if you get the right equipment, we're going to get a good look at some of these things. There is a festival at the Mekong River in Thailand. Okay. I should take a breath.
It's okay.
There's a festival at the Mekong River in Thailand. Every year, they call them the Naga lights. These lights emerge from the river and go up into the sky. And they're so regular, they have bleachers by the side of the river. It's a festival that draws tens of thousands of people. And they sit there and they cheer as these lights go up into the sky. Now, I don't know if anybody's gotten a good look at these things yet, but you could go there and imagine if you could get a good look at one of those things and collect one of those things. So there's all kinds of places for possible future study.
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit of video of those online. I was really super amazed. Some of the video's good.
But it begs the question, though. Where do the Greys fall into this? Where do the other aliens that people report fall into this ecosystem? You see what I'm saying? I mean, because...
Well, really, one theory does not ruin the other one.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have
that's
nuts
the
and bolts
question.
ships and gray aliens.
Yeah.
This is just
And
think
I
of these
think
as wild animals.
Yeah.
Right. That's a great way to look at them. They're kind of wildlife. Yeah.
Well,
and I
See,
think
the
you have to
reason
look
why
at,
I was curious is because is there any evidence, and this is really going far out there, so bear with me, Scott. Is there any evidence that the Greys or other aliens that do visit here that people see all the time, these humanoid type aliens, are they harnessing the exact power that you had mentioned earlier to cross vast distances? Rather than being in a UFO, they're in one of these organisms.
Well, that's a possibility, and I think that kind of speculation. As I said, I entertain all possibilities. I think you have to look at the evidence if you really want to be, critical about it. I think you have to look at the evidence, and I don't know what kind of evidence there is for, the humanoids, for the kind of abductions by the Greys. I mean, you would think if it happens as frequently as people say, that we would see video of it, or some kind of there would be some kind of hard evidence, like a reputable video of it. Now we know that there are hundreds of videos of these kind of objects moving through the sky. Now there's a possibility. I mean, a lot of marine invertebrates use lures to try and attract prey. There's a possibility. Some of the descriptions of some landed UFOs, they seem to have things coming out from the underside, and then when people get close, the things go back into the underside. Maybe there's some kind of appendages. Maybe, and this is total speculation, maybe there is some kind of symbiotic relationship with other organisms. Maybe these things are living craft, and sometimes they have, caretakers, inhabitants that move around. But like I said, I think first you have to look at the evidence and see where that leads you.
See, and the reason why that popped into my head was something that Doug had said a while back, that here on Earth, right, he's observed the wolves and crows having a relationship, a mutual beneficial relationship. So it would stand to reason, could the same thing be happening here? And that's why I know it's really far out there, and I know it's probably a crazy theory, but just kind of popped in my head that maybe there is some cooperation going on amongst these species.
Well, Joel, I don't think that's as far out as you might think. This is kind of speculative too, but I mean, in the past, a lot of different cultures have described things coming down from the sky, and a lot of them describe them as gods. Some of them describe them as creatures. And if you look at some of the relics of ancient civilizations, we find one thing on almost every continent, and that past civilizations have left and have endured, and those are pyramids. They made these mounds, these platforms, to reach up, for whatever reason, to reach up to the sky. So, who knows? Maybe there was some kind of relationship in the past. Maybe they knew that there was some sort of benefit that these things brought us. Maybe there was some kind of partnership going on, and who knows? We might actually, and this is another reason to investigate them further, we might actually be able to form some kind of partnership with them in the future. So this is, that's kind of way out, but who knows? Until we start, I have found that if you're not looking for something, you're not going to find it. So if we start looking for these things, I think we're going to find them. And if we keep ourselves open to the possibilities of what we might find, then I think we might find stuff beyond what we can even imagine. We got to start looking.
Is there a way that people can kind of hedge their odds and film these things? I'd heard about, it's been so long ago, where people were filming under the eaves on bright sunny days and filming a lot of these things. Can you?
Yeah, there's a lot of techniques for trying to capture these things. People have used a lot of different techniques. There was one gentleman, there's a fancy scientific device called a coronagraph. And basically what it does, it blots out the sun, but it lets the bright light at the edge of the sun through. So you can see what the bright light might reveal. Now, one guy developed a technique where he would put the camera of his video camera under the corner of the roof of his house, under the eaves of his house, when the sun was above, and he would point it up at the sun, but actually block out the sun. So as we were talking about, the extreme lighting conditions then revealed some of these things in the atmosphere. And he got some really incredible footage of things that look like giant marine invertebrates, and some of these things were pretty big, and some of them seemed to be moving really rapidly. Some of them had different lobes, and they looked like some of these a newly discovered species of jellyfish that it was coincidental. It was almost discovered like the year after he filmed this thing, because it has these like kind of alternating lobes, and you're looking at it going, what is that? And then you see, oh my gosh, they just found a jellyfish that looks just like this. So I would suggest maybe people look near dawn or near sunset. They might look at the edges of clouds. But really, you got to be patient, and you got.
For the ones who know safety isn't a catchphrase, it's a culture. And the ones who help make sure everyone makes it home safe. For the safety-minded who watch everyone's backs, Grainger offers supplies and solutions for every industry, as well as safety assessments and training to keep your facilities safe and your people safer. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Whatever you're funny, Peacock's got it exclusively. Stream classic sitcoms like The Office, Parks and Recreation, and 2.5 Men. Plus, catch Peacock original comedies like AP Bio and Saved by the Bell. For all your exclusive comedy faves, go to PeacockTV.com and get started.
Be persistent. I think a lot of people have used night vision cameras to identify these things at night, but also during the day. There's actually some interesting footage where people actually looked up into the sky during the day. The technology we have now really provides a wealth of different possibilities. But the main thing is keep your eyes open and look at the edges, near the edges of mountains, near the edges of clouds, and you got to be quiet because these things do seem to react to people. Again, John Keel mentioned when he was studying these things, he said they don't seem to want to be around people, which is kind of smart if you think about it, because the first thing a lot of people would do if they saw one of these things is shoot it,
Yeah, grab the 12 gauge. Let's get one of these down on the ground.
Exactly. Which may not be a bad decision, but, for its own self-preservation, it's going to hightail it out of here. They seem to want to avoid people. So a lot of times when people are looking for these weird lights, the first thing they do when they see one is they go, look, did you see that? And then the thing goes zipping away. So
the warmer climates,
a lot of people
were seeing. Oh, go ahead, sir. Sorry about that.
No, go ahead.
You had said earlier that the warmer climates yield the better result than the colder climates. Did I hear you correctly on that for observing these creatures?
Well, I'm not an expert on this. Just in my research, there are a lot of reports of the latitudes near the equator. There's just a lot of reports of aerial objects that seem to resemble creatures. The Amazon River, people have seen. There's some great stories about these big discs emerging from the river, glowing blue, and they hover above the surface of the water as the water pours off of them. And then they're so big it takes minutes for the water to pour off of them, and then they go zipping up into the sky. There was a gentleman named Bob Pratt who wrote a book called UFO Danger Zone, where he went to Brazil and he talked to the natives that were down there about the UFOs that they were seeing. And these people knew that they were animals. They were being hunted by these animals. And some of them had been severely injured. Some of them had real neurological damage, but they described these things actually hunting them and, darting around trees, hunting the people. One grabbed a guy and was trying to pull him up a tree. And he was holding onto the trunk of the tree for dear life. This thing was yanking him up and down as he's holding onto the trunk of the tree. But a lot of them, some of them disappeared. They were carried away because they couldn't hold on. So that there's a lot of reports like that. There's an island in Brazil, Colares Island, where there's been a lot of sightings down there too, and people have been injured by exposure to these things. So I would guess that the warmer, moister atmosphere down there is going to provide a good habitat for that.
The reason I brought that up... go ahead, Doug. Sorry about that.
Well, I was just going to ask, I wonder if these things are ever reported, like in buildings, in homes, where they've let the door open. They come into people's houses. Have you heard any reports like that, Scott?
Well, it's interesting. There's a wide range of phenomena that we tend to call by different names that might all be described by this whole idea of this wildlife of the atmosphere. What people call ball lightning sometimes behaves just like you described, Doug. People have said that ball lightning sometimes seems to enter homes through windows. One woman described this ball of light that came into her home, was wandering around, and she was standing there. It was at her feet, and it slowly rose up the long length of her body until it was like it was right in front of her face, and it was glowing and kind of buzzing, and then it zipped off and went through a hole, and it seemingly went right through the wall and disappeared. And they looked and they found later that there was a vent pipe in the wall that had been papered over with wallpaper. And this thing somehow went right through where the vent pipe was and out the vent pipe. So ball lightning, again, is another phenomenon people seem to describe as moving with intelligence, browsing around, sometimes interacting with people. Sometimes
That's
I think some of the things... there's actually, you can look for days and find all kinds. With the advent of everybody having a camera, you can look for just about any topic that would be related to this, and you will find video about it. Like if you look for...
What are some search terms, Scott?
People can look for orbs. And a lot of what people will see and record as orbs are indeed particles of dust and particles of droplets of water in the atmosphere. But you're going to see a lot of weird things that seem to act like immature organisms, like immature jellyfish or immature squid. I mean, they seem to be zipping around, moving around. So that general term people call orbs, you're going to find some interesting footage. I have sort of a short survey of different orb videos, and there are some amazing footage. One of the creepiest one is there's a kid laying in his bed, and these parents are watching him through a nanny cam, and there's this ball of light. It's kind of glowing. It's about a little bit bigger than a softball, and it's sitting on the kid's bed, like watching over him as he's sleeping. And the parents are like, "What is that? Look at that!" I'd be in there going, "Shoo, get away!" But this thing is, that's if you're looking for the orb video, that's in part of that compilation. But it makes you wonder, are these things looking down at us, and what do they think of our activity as they're up there?
Well, think of how many paranormal investigators out there that are associating orbs with ghosts, right? And maybe that's not the case at all.
Right. Well, there's a lot of phenomena that could be explained by this. Ghosts. There's a phenomena called white ladies, where these white draped creatures or figures come out of springs or bodies of water. And if you think about that, you go, "Well, gee, that sounds like some kind of organism emerging from the water." But I think it's there's a lot of strategies to go forward, and I think there's a lot of there's a lot of reasons that it's important to study this. I think the first reason I mentioned briefly was safety. You don't want people to encounter these things. People should know to avoid these things. Pilots, there have been a lot of cases of encounters with airplanes where pilots have encountered these things, and there have been many recorded accidents where aircraft have encountered these things, and we want to find a way to make sure that we can minimize that. And if we're sending astronauts up, we want to make sure that they're as safe as they can possibly be. So we need to understand that. I think another reason that it's so important is that people see these things and they don't know what to do with their experience. They've seen something that other people can't relate to. So a lot of UFO witnesses feel kind of lost. They feel flustered. It's like the Richard Dreyfuss character in Close Encounters. there's some meaning, but their world is shaken. So I think it's important for people to realize they may have seen something wonderful, but it might be something that's perfectly natural. They're not nuts. They're not crazy. A lot of other people have seen these, and it's something that's perfectly natural. So I think that's really important, because a lot of people have gotten a lot of ridicule and derision, and they've doubted their own sanity because of what they've seen. So I think that's really important. I think if we look at these things, nature is a wonderful designer, and I think we can maybe learn from these things about get some great technological advances that we might not be able to come up with our own. But if nature has solved this, if these things are zipping around at these incredible speeds, maintaining their orientation, surviving these adverse conditions, maybe we can, garner some knowledge from them and leapfrog based on their design. And I think it's a possibility that we might actually be able to utilize these things or learn from these things to expand beyond our planet. I think there's a certain point, we're at a time now that's unique in history. We have instant worldwide communication, and we have the technology that allows us to do so many things. All this isn't for an accident. It's almost like we're being set up for a big jump. And this might be the opportunity for us to make this jump and, expand our reach beyond this planet. If for nothing else, I think it's important that we understand these things' effect on our climate, just to preserve the home that we do have. So those are some of the reasons I think it's important to study this further.
Yeah, I was going to
ask. Joel, have you... sorry.
Not problem,
I just want to ask you, have you seen the jets with the big caved-in nose
I was
cones?
just about to ask that. It's funny you bring that up, because I was just about to ask that, because we discussed that off air, and I realized I'm a kid at Christmas here. Sorry about that, folks, for being such a chatty cat. Because this is all new to me, and it's blowing my ever-loving mind over here, because I'm doing digging while you're talking, and it's really connecting a lot of dots. So I do apologize for me being a little quick on the microphone. But yeah, what about that? Doug and I were talking about actual collisions with jets and causing physical damage to the nose cones. So there's mass to these things. They're not just, a gas or what have you. There's actual organisms that have weight to them.
I don't think a goose can put a perfect round dent in an aircraft.
Well, that's the kind of the traditional explanation, that they hit a bird. But think of the size of the bird it would have to be to, like you said, put that kind of dent in it. I think that's one reason. It's very important.
Take a big Thanksgiving Day turkey to do
that. Well, imagine, how dense and how heavy water is. Imagine a huge bag of water, and all of a sudden a jet runs right into it. There's been several famous cases where airplanes have encountered these things, but there's been some that are kind of less well documented. I mean, I don't know if you've heard about the Frederick Valentich case from Australia, the guy that was flying his Cessna over the Bass Strait, and this thing was, he was a young pilot. He was flying, he was doing a delivery run, and this thing was hovering over him, and it was sort of playing with him. And he was radioing back and forth, and is there any traffic around here? And they say, no. And this thing was zipping around, and then it hovered right above him. And he said, it's right above me, and it's not a machine. And then there was this crunching noise, and he disappeared. And they never found him. And so that, the last words were, it's not a machine.
Well,
in 1959, go ahead.
Well, it's one of the characteristics is this playfulness. If it's a nuts and bolts craft, why would it want to play?
Right. That's interesting. You're right, because a lot of them do seem to play. They seem to be toying with the planes, checking them out, shadowing them, following them. Yeah. There's a gentleman, Lieutenant Colonel Graham Bethune, and he had a great story. They were flying from Iceland to Newfoundland. And he's out over the North Atlantic, and he looks down and he sees there's like the lights of a city on the water. And he's like, there's nothing out here. You see radios based, and is the Navy conducting any exercises out here? And he said, no. And all of a sudden, the thing rises up out of the water. It goes dark for a second, and then it gets light and raises up like to his level of flight, and then it covers like 15 miles in a second. And he's like trying to take evasive action. And he describes it. He said it was right in front of the plane, and it was a monster. And then the thing zipped off to the side, and he said it was checking him out. He said it was just did like a threatening maneuver, came right up to him, and then started checking him out. There's a lot of other cases like that where pilots report these things, just sort of coming out and checking out the planes to make sure they're not doing any harm.
Wow,
but
talking about Pucker Factor 10 moment, though.
What about bird falls, Scott? Where these birds just fall out of the sky. Do you think that's possibly related?
Well, who knows? That's one thing. We sometimes see falls of organic matter from the atmosphere. There's sometimes thousands of birds will fall out of the atmosphere and seem stunned. And a lot of them die, and people wonder, what's causing these birds to just fall by the thousands. This just happened in Philadelphia recently. And you think of these vast swarms of birds. I mean, we're talking like, miles, hundreds of miles long of migrating birds. What if there were these big predators up there, and there was all of a sudden this swarm of food going by, and they descended with their, stinging tentacles and stung a bunch of them, and a lot of them are going to invariably fall out. The ones that it didn't broom up, that it didn't suck up, are going to fall, and you might see them. So just like the cattle that are mutilated, I think it would be interesting to do some kind of chemical analysis to see if there's any trace of, toxins in these creatures. But there's also been falls of like flesh and even blood that somehow just falls out of the sky, and even this is kind of gruesome, but even body parts have fallen out of the sky.
Yeah.
And you play the game if then, where you go, well, if these things are, preying on people and creatures, would you find, carcasses in tops of trees, or and you go, well, yeah, there's many reports of bodies found in the tops of trees, or animals found on tops of telephone poles, and it's like, well, what's picking them up there?
But think about this for a second, Scott. They can pluck any. Here's what's really crazy when you think about it. They could pick up anybody anytime. Then anybody, anyone. You're on the menu.
Sleep tight, folks. Yeah, sweet dreams. I know it's a little disturbing, isn't it? I mean, but it makes a lot of sense. I think you made a great term, Joel, when you said connect. It connects a lot of dots. And I'll go so far as to say, if you look at,
and wait till you see them,
some of the best. Yeah, that's the thing. If looking at the footage, I think you got to really look at the evidence. And we're looking at it's an unusual topic. It's an extraordinary claim. And I think you got to look at the evidence. And I think you have to be very particular about the evidence that you look at. You have to look at the source. And because unfortunately, there's a lot of hoaxing and stuff that goes on, which is very detrimental to the topic. So this is one of the reasons I think that original new research is going to be productive, because you'll know the conditions under which it's gathered, and you won't be arguing, what was it like? What is it really? If you go out, I predict if we go out there with the right tools and go to the right places and are a little persistent, I think we're going to get great evidence that's going to validate this hypothesis. But we'll see.
Now, here goes the conspiracy part of me. Does the government know about these things? Does the government know about these? I mean, and if so,
well,
why have they not taken any safeguards to protect people from them?
It's fun to speculate. Joel, they may have. We don't know about it. If they know about it, they may have. This gentleman, Trevor James Constable, talked about these people that reported the Air Force coming out. There were these objects off the coast of New Jersey. They were going in and out of the water. They were like these pulsing objects going in and out of the water. And the Air Force brought out a portable radar unit. And they were fiddling with the frequency, and they finally found a frequency. They turned it up high enough that it actually, disabled the things. I don't know if it cooked them or what, but they like shuddered and they fell into the water. They weren't flying anymore. So who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe
and that could explain
there
the
are
Shag
some kind
Harbor.
of protective domes over radar.
Exactly. Also could explain the Shag Harbor incident.
Okay, fill me in on that one.
That is the USO, where they saw emerge from the water something that almost fits what you're talking about to a T, coming up out of the water. All these people saw it, and then it takes off into space. But it was able to survive underwater, and then it came up, and they mentioned the lights. And Doug, I'm sure you know all about the Shag Harbor incident. Am I correct?
Yep.
Am I correct, sir? And
Yep.
so all these people witnessed this organism or ship. They called it a ship. But now that you've talked about them having different abilities for luminescence, stuff like that, it would really fit that very well could have been one of these creatures coming from the ocean, and not a UFO, but
it could
one
be
of these creatures.
There's a lot of reports of objects emerging from the water like that and going up into the atmosphere. And if you think about it, there's a lot of organisms that we know have part of their life cycle in the water and in the atmosphere. Sometimes they move in and out of the atmosphere. Sometimes they spend their youth in the water, and then they, metamorphose and then go up into the air. I mean, there's a whole group of squid called flying squid. In fact, there's one even called a luminous flying squid. And we know these things can fly. The ones we know about can fly out of the water for up to a mile, through the air. So what are the big boys doing? How long can they fly out of the water?
I don't want to find out, Scott.
Well, there's been some reports of fishermen around Australia and New Zealand where the giant squid actually have flown out of the water. They're not giant squid, but big squid have flown out of the water and actually attacked these guys. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bad day on sea right there, man. That constitute bad.
Yeah, there's one story of a guy. There's one story of a guy who was sleeping on deck, and he woke up, and there was a giant squid in the rigging above him. I guess it had gotten caught as it was zipping over his boat. And it got stuck in the rigging above. And he woke up to that hanging over his head.
Oh, good Lord! Wow, damn.
Well, by the way, Joel, you got to take garbage out tonight.
Right, exactly. And then I am very interested in tracking these things. I've been a paranormal investigator for many years. This is the first time I heard about these. I like to put in some real effort to capturing these on film. I would like to learn more about them and their habitats and really what makes them tick. And where we can see them most.
Well, there are many,
and what they're feeding on.
There are many places around the world where you can see, these luminous phenomena. So if you do a little research on mystery lights or spook lights, there's a good chance that somewhere near you or within several hours drive, there's some location where people are seeing, unexplained luminous phenomena moving around.
Mm-hmm.
And move around through the atmosphere. So if you look, you're going to find something. Like I said, if you check out the Cohoke light thing that we did, that was, with our limited resources, we saw some really cool stuff. But it takes a little patience. A lot of people aren't built for sitting still in the dark quietly. A lot of people want to check their phones and fidget around and turn on the lights and stuff. But you got to sit quietly and look for these things if you want to find them. You got to treat them kind of like a hunter or a biologist, and use a little stealth if you want to get some good results. But there are a lot of different places where you can go see these things. In fact, I'm going to wonder if maybe sometime in the future we can actually collect these things. And, like we have aquariums now.
Yeah.
Maybe sometime in the future we'll have like sky aquariums, where people can actually see these things that we've collected. And, we have the lighting set up and the pressurized tanks, so people could actually see these things and marvel at their wonders, if we get out there and collect these things. I don't know, we'll collect a 100-mile tall one, but maybe some of the babies.
That would be interesting. It kind of begs the question, what lures them in? I mean, if you're out there looking for them and you're actively looking to snag one or catch one or put one in captivity, I wonder what the best bait would be to use. Would it be, somebody like me standing in the middle of a cornfield saying, come and eat me? Or you a little more stealthy than even that?
You got to take your shirt off and smear yourself with butter, Joel. That's what you got to do.
I thought it was bacon grease. See, no. I thought it would be bacon grease, but
well, we tried using lights down to get the cohoke light, and we caught an image of one of these things blinking. So we put it on a loop and put it on a laptop and had the blinking thing looping and put it on the track. And within minutes, we had things in the sky, like checking it out. So since these things, a lot of them may be bioluminescent, I would guess that light may be something they're attracted to, that we might be able to attract, used to attract.
Mm-hmm. That makes complete sense. Lights would be much like a fish, modern day fish when you go fishing. It's all presentation.
What attracted him to the tether, Scott?
I don't know. I know, Doug, you mentioned that you thought that it might be the charge of the tether. Yeah. I mean, they were trying to get a static charge on that tether by dragging it through the atmosphere. Like you drag a comb through your hair and get the charge. And maybe they were drawn to that charge. Maybe they were just drawn to the physicality of it being there. We won't know until we do some experiments and see.
Well, if you're a fisherman,
you gotta find,
fish like structure. They like a tree at the bottom of the lake. They like structure. So maybe it was just structure out in,
It could be just a structure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Could be simple.
I know there's been reports of pilots flying by weather balloons, the giant weather balloons.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been reports, they have seen disc-shaped things clinging to the side of the weather balloon. So like you said, maybe it's just the structure, something to grab onto. But those things, in that tether video, that STS-75 tether video, they look like they were reacting to something invading their environment. They were swarming it. You can see the increase in numbers is just amazing. So now another thing we found out down when we were looking at the Cohoe Light in Virginia is there seemed to be a swarm of objects that were invisible to the naked eye, but it was right near sunset, and we were filming in slow motion, and all of a sudden they became visible. This massive objects like swarming around, just moving around, these disc-shaped objects, just out of the range of our perception. So they might have been, I don't know what they were just drawn to, coming out from their underground habitats at dusk or what, but I think they're out there. They're probably out there in greater numbers than we can imagine. And all it's going to take is us looking for them to find them.
Mm-hmm. Well, Scott, unfortunately, we're almost out of time. And wow, you have done exactly what Doug said you were going to do. You're blowing my mind. It makes me think of the atmosphere and what we got going on way differently than what I came in. And I know the audience is feeling the same way. Scott Deschaine, everybody, check out the Cohoe Lights. A Mystery in the Sky. You're going to want to check that out. And, of course, the Cohoe Light, A Mystery in the Sky documentary. Give that a watch and definitely check out the livingsky.com website. That's Scott's website. And make sure you also stop in at untoldradiam.com to listen to this show again if you're listening live. And if you want to refer a friend to listen to this, absolutely. It is really mind-blowing stuff. Scott, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity to share this information. As I mentioned, this is a big topic. I hope that all the young people and scientists will reach out and take a new look at this frontier of science. I think it's going to have great things for humanity and for our abilities in the future.
It is really amazing. Until next time, guys, I'm Joel Sturgis. That's Doug Hajicek. Take care of each other, love each other, and enjoy your Halloween, but be safe.
new free streaming service from NBC Universal. It's hit movies, current shows, live sports, trending bits, and timeless hits. And that's why you can't not watch. Peacock. Watch for free. Upgrade for more. Stream now at peacocktv.com. Law & Order SVU streaming now. Whatever you're funny, Peacock's got it exclusively. Stream classic sitcoms like The Office, Parks and Recreation, and 2.5 Men. Plus, catch Peacock original comedies like AP Bio and Saved by the Bell. For all your exclusive comedy faves, go to peacocktv.com and get started.